Welcome back. That was Liz Cheney laying out exactly what she believes is at stake in these midterm elections at today's January 6th hearing. It's the last one we'll see before voters head to the polls in November, and in many ways, the swan song for anti-Trump Republicans, like Cheney, who had lost her primary earlier this year. I'm joined on set now with my panel today, Democratic strategist Basil Smikle and Commentary Magazine editor Noah Rothman. All right, Basil.
Yeah.
Trump's been subpoenaed. Does it matter on the ballot for November?
Well, if he flails or starts waving his hands and, spits anger at the Democrats, then I think the Democrats will find a way to play that up. I don't know that it actually matters. The voters have a lot on their mind right now with this inflation news, which and for some candidates, crime. You heard Lee Zeldin talking a lot about that in New York and closed the gap a little bit with the Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul. So those things I think are going to resonate more. But it would make for maybe good talking points on the Dem side.
It's interesting, Noah. I've already heard from some conservatives, and you might have, saying, hey, it could only fire up the Trump voter, this subpoena, if he plays the grievance victim card. What say you?
Yeah, but it fires up everybody else in the wrong direction. Anytime Donald Trump is at the top of the headline, it's not great for Republicans. We saw this in August after the Mar-a-Lago raid, in combination with the ruling in Dobbs. It reminded voters about everything they don't like about Republicans, because all of a sudden they stand for something. They're no longer a generic vehicle of opposition to the party in power. They actually have people, they have ideas, they have candidates, and we don't really like all of them. If Republicans are lucky, this goes nowhere. It mires down in litigation, and Donald Trump keeps his head down, and that's the best thing they can hope for.
Basil, we saw that report in Politico today. I think there's maybe, there's just a handful of ads that do January 6th. The most prominent I see actually is, I think there's an open seat race in Wisconsin, the 3rd district, where the Republican was at the Capitol on January 6th, and it's a very closely contested race. It's probably one of the few where I think it might be front and center, maybe even in Washington State where Jamie Herrera Butler lost.
Yeah, and I take Bernie Sanders' op-ed at its, for what it says. Abortion's very important.
Yeah. Got
to be on the front burner. But Democrats can't cede ground to Republicans on any of the other issues. And if we talk about only abortion and only January 6th, although those are obviously polling very well and they are mobilizing for Democrats, we cannot lose ground on anything.
Let me talk about an issue that hurts both parties here, meaning it's the decision, do you respond to your negatives or do you ignore them and just go forward, right? So you just brought up abortion on January 6th, and some Democrats would say, no, just focus on what you think works, right? With Republicans, I've heard this, tune out the abortion issue, just focus on prices, focus on crime. How much time should some of these candidates try to spend some time inoculating themselves on abortion, inoculating themselves on crime? Noah, you first.
So Republicans have spent a fair amount of time fielding questions about their approach to abortion, their philosophy on abortion, whether this is a state's issue or a federal issue, in part because this ruling has shed a lot of light on the pro-life movement. Recently, in the last couple of weeks, we've started to see Democrats have to explain what they believe. Had to say, well, maybe I don't really think there should be any limits on abortion up to 9 months. This is just as out of step with the public as a doctrinaire pro-life view that doesn't view any exceptions outside of the life of the mother as something that should be law. And to the extent that Democrats have to defend their position on this, it does help Republicans. It makes them look far less extreme. In light of, for example, most recently, a couple of interviews with, for example, Stacey Abrams in Georgia. Lindsey Graham's 15-week ban doesn't look all that extreme. It actually looks very close to what the national consensus on the issue would be in the absence of Roe, and probably would have gotten there decades ago. We've just interrupted that process, and we're coming around to it. It's just Lindsey's mistake was to make that a federal issue and not a state-level issue. And people on the federal Republicans looking for federal office don't want to talk about it.
Right. Listen, I think something like reproductive rights, I think is built in. If you don't have an opinion about that now, and it's not mobilizing you now, I don't know that it ever will. So I do think Democrats have an opportunity to pivot here. If you listen to Tim Ryan the other day in his debate, looking at him, watching him going off against Vance and really sort of putting it to him in terms of law enforcement. How could you stand for January 6th and then say that you support law enforcement in this country? That is actually quite powerful. What bothers me about that is that he's also complaining that Democrats nationally are not putting money behind his race. And to me, that's what's so concerning, that if Democrats have the opportunity to talk about other issues and they're doing it in a strong enough way, is the national party actually going out and supporting that? Those two things have to work in tandem.
It is in conflict.
I feel like that is just such a flip approach to the issue of of crime at saying, okay, well, this black swan event that has happened once in the history of the United States, where do you stand on that versus the day-to-day crime that people experience in their average lives, the people who they know who've been mugged or have had a gun put to their head? The commonality of crime is the problem here, not these one-off black swan events. And to say that, well, if you're soft on that, you're soft on everything.
January 6th is a black swan event.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the destruction of our democracy.
God save us. Yeah, sure.
But I don't actually think the Democrats are not talking about. I think Tim Ryan understands that he is.
You just brought up something, though. The two best Democrats that I've seen try to inoculate themselves on crime is Tim Ryan in Ohio and former Chief Val Demings in Florida.
Sure.
Right.
Two states that the Democratic Party's walked away from.
No,
Can you
it's
defend
upsetting.
this?
No, I can't. It's upsetting. One of the lessons we learned from Georgia is contesting every race everywhere. And if you're not doing that, particularly if you're Tim Ryan, who I would say understands crime, he is running as a blue collar Democrat, and he's arguing that the party is not supporting blue collar Democrats. When I was running the state party, one of the hardest things for us to do was find Democrats to run in rural races. I mean, this is defeatist at best.
Go ahead.
I mean, the test is going to be in Wisconsin, right, with Johnson and Mandela Barnes. If Mandela Barnes loses by 6 points, as this Marist poll suggests he is.
Marquette.
Marquette, thank you. If it suggests he is, I mean, that is the test of the soft on crime message, the decarceral approach to criminal justice reform.
You know, it has been fascinating watching that. Let me ask this to you, Noah. Overall, right now, do you look? Is this a national environment that has wind blowing strongly in either direction these days, or do you feel like it's swirling?
I mean, it doesn't look that way from the polls, but to consult my gut, yes, I absolutely do think Democrats, I think, made a fatal error on August 7th when they passed something they called the Inflation Reduction Act, which the University of Pennsylvania Wharton School says is going to increase inflation in the interim.
Never understood that naming convention. But Joe Manchin and Chuck Schumer thought they were clever, all on their own, and didn't talk to anybody else.
Messaging is a massive problem for us this year, whether it's Inflation Reduction Act or having to defend defunding the police.
They're going to say, well, listen, you know, we reduced your prescription drug costs. Nobody knows that, right? We have to talk about it more. What's up in this inflation report? Medical care costs by a full point in September alone.
Boy, it covered up their big happy news about Social Security today.
It definitely did.
All right, guys. You guys were terrific. You ought to do this more often with me. I'll be up here more often. We got two News Now programming notes. First, don't miss our latest episode of Meet the Press Reports. It's tonight at 10:30. I took a deep dive into the state of Wisconsin.